All right, on a much more serious note, the president and the first lady will head to Pittsburgh tomorrow. A horrifying killing unfolded on Saturday as a gunman massacred 11 innocent worshipers in a local synagogue. It was an attack on people of faith by a man who said he wanted to, quote, kill Jews. Tonight, there are calls for unity, as there always are. But until both sides are willing to reach out and lower the heat, it feels unlikely. Talk of tone, rhetoric, and civility in politics pervades, with many pointing fingers at the president for not cooling his own language, a notion the White House strongly rejects.
The president's not responsible for these acts. Again, the very first action that the president did was condemn these heinous acts. The very first thing that the media did was condemn the president and go after and try to place blame, not just on the president, but everybody that works in this administration.
So in a moment, we'll be joined by Mercedes Schlapp with new reaction from the White House tonight, as well as Howie Kurtz, Jonathan Swan, and later an exclusive with the president's 2020 campaign manager, Brad Parscale. But we start with Trace Gallagher, as the shooting suspect was in court for the first time today. Trace.
Martha, the suspect, 46-year-old Robert Bowers, who was shot multiple times, arrived to court in a wheelchair. When he was asked by a judge if he understood the 29 federal charges against him, including 11 counts of murder and hate crimes, Bowers responded, quote, yes, sir. Prosecutors have already said they plan to seek the death penalty. Authorities say Bowers stormed the Tree of Life synagogue on Saturday with a rifle and 3 handguns, all of which he legally owned. Rabbi Jeffrey Myers said he heard a loud noise that sounded like a steel coat rack falling, but when he saw people running and heard pops, he knew it was gunfire. Watch.
I instructed my congregants to drop to the floor, don't move, be quiet. I took the people, some of the people were in the front, and tried to get them out of the sanctuary, through the front of the sanctuary, through some of the doors we have there, to either an exit out of the building or to a closet someplace to hide.
Rabbi Myers then hid in the bathroom and called 911. He says he could hear the shooter execute his congregants. Robert Bowers is a long-haul trucker with a significant history of making anti-Semitic and other bigoted statements on social media. The day of the shooting, Bowers reportedly went on to Gab.com, a site favored by right-wing extremists, and wrote about his opposition to the migrant caravan, blaming a Jewish aid group for bringing, quote, invaders that kill our people, though it's unclear who exactly his people are. Police say before, during, and after the rampage, Robert Bowers made numerous statements about killing Jews, saying Jews need to die, even repeating those statements to the doctors and nurses trying to save his life, all of whom are Jewish. And as the White House said that President Trump and the First Lady will visit Pittsburgh tomorrow, a liberal Jewish group sent an open letter to the president saying he is not welcome until he denounces white nationalism. But Rabbi Myers, who may have saved numerous lives, said he welcomes the president's visit. The first 2 funerals will also be held in Pittsburgh tomorrow for 59-year-old Cecil Rosenthal and his 54-year-old brother, David. Martha.
They would greet everybody as they came into the synagogue, these brothers who had been going there for decades. It's just horrific. Trace, thank you very much. So in the wake of that attack in Pittsburgh, critics were quick to blame at the top.
There's no question that the toxic environment that we're now in of hate speech has not been helped by the president's words. Absolutely not.
The flames of his hatred were fanned by a president who kept talking about this caravan of refugees as if they were terrorists.
I think this president's whole modus operandi is to divide us. He gets up in the morning with new and inventive ways to divide us.
Here now, Mercedes Schlapp, White House Director of Strategic Communications. Mercedes, good evening. Good to have you with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So you heard all of that. What's your reaction?
You know, clearly the president's first message after this tragedy happened in Pittsburgh was that of uniting the country. And the Democrats and some in the media have focused their time basically dividing the country, in essence, blaming the president and his staff, actually, for these horrific acts. I mean, that's just simply outrageous. They've spent hours and hours, some in the media and as well as the Democrats, just focusing on putting this blame on the president. I mean, we saw the president of one media organization basically going after Sarah Sanders and President Trump. So what I spoke with a friend of mine who's Jewish American, and she told me something so interesting, and she's not political, and she said to me, she goes, when I heard this, it literally took away from this solemn moment. It took away from honoring the victims and honoring these families who are going through this horrific time. This is a moment of prayer in this country. This is a moment of unity for this country. That is the message that the president has sent to the American people. Right. And we, of course, feel very distressed by the fact that the Democrats and some of the media have decided to just put the blame on the president.
Well, let's take a look at a couple of the president's tweets, the first of which mirrors exactly what you're saying. It says, all of America is in mourning over the mass murder of Jewish Americans at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. We pray for those who perished and their loved ones, and our hearts go out to the brave police officers who sustained serious injuries. And it goes on in that vein. But then, Mercedes, this is the next one. There is great anger in our country, caused in part by inaccurate, even fraudulent reporting of the news. The fake news media, the true enemy of the people, must stop the open and obvious hostility and report the news accurately and fairly. Does that help to unite the country, calling the press the enemy of the people?
Let's start with who started this fight. Right after the president talked about unifying the country, and even beforehand, there were certain liberal media outlets, as well as the Democrats, coming out and outrightly putting blame on the president. This included Senator Schumer. This included Representative Nancy Pelosi. Yeah. So to be clear, they're starting this battle by putting the blame, this very horrific act caused by deranged individuals.
I think you're right. I mean, you can pretty much trace. I hear what you're saying, and you can trace, the beginning of the president's good intention to say the right thing and to recognize the horrific moment and the event. But then you can also see the president's reaction to what comes at him. And I think, in many ways, obviously you can't blame him, but there are those who are sort of calling for him to take a higher road because, as Anthony Scaramucci, who worked in the White House for a short time, he said the president's the only person we all vote for. So for me, I would love to see the stuff dialed back on both sides. But good leadership requires that somebody go first, and I'd like it to be him.
Yeah, and the president did go first. And the president talked about unifying this country. It's an important message that we keep discussing. With that being said, it was in less than moments after these tragedies have happened that the blame was put solely on this president.
Which is wrong.
In terms of
I think everybody can agree. Nobody pulled that trigger other than the gunman.
Right.
I think every sane, thinking human being who watches this, and like your friend, does not want this to be the focus. But let me ask you this. In terms of, the high road, is there any discussion among you at the White House about the president, giving a speech perhaps as a starting point to say, you know what, let's have a truce. This isn't serving anybody well. Is there any discussion about something along those lines?
The president tomorrow will be traveling to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he'll be meeting with the governor as well as the mayor, and as well as the rabbi of the synagogue. And it is a moment of time where he will be mourning with those families who have lost loved ones. He will honor these brave men and women who lost their lives. And this is a moment in time in our country where that has to stand. That's the moment. This is a moment where we do have to come in prayer, where we do have to think about this horrible tragedy that happened because of a deranged individual who took these innocent lives. And so the president has talked about this message. Whether the media and the Democrats want to stop trying to score political points, we'll wait and see what happens. Let's see how they cover it tomorrow. So far, I have found that it has been just saddening to watch how the direct blame in less than 24 hours after these tragedies have happened has been squarely on the president and on his staff, which is very irresponsible and unfair. And so I think the president responded to the media and how some of those in the media portrayed the president and how they're allowing these continual discussions to happen about just clearly criticizing criticizing the president at all costs and not looking at the core of the problem here, which are dealing with deranged individuals who have taken innocent lives.
There's no doubt about that, and there's no doubt about the fact that as a country, we all need to pray for these families, because you can just imagine what it is like for these 11 individuals' families, all of whom are mourning. And as you say, the president and first lady will go there to join them and the community in spirit in that effort as well tomorrow. Mercedes, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight, as always.
Thank you so much.
Here now with more tonight, Howie Kurtz, host of Media Buzz, and Jonathan Swan, national political reporter for Axios. Good to have both of you with us tonight. Jonathan, let me start with you, just in terms of the coverage and watching this from both sides, the White House and the press. How do you think the press has done?
Well, I don't sort of try to get in the game of press criticism. I think some of the coverage with this president on any given topic is over the top and hysterical. I think we find that no matter what the topic is. And, you know, from his side of things, I mean, again, I don't really like getting into.
No, I understand that,
tits
and I'm
and
not
tats,
trying to
but
get
I
you
will
to
just
be
say,
into.
but I will just say one thing. It does concern me as someone who cares about the press and the media and also just this country, even though I have a different accent, when he uses the term the enemy of the people. There are a lot of people who love this president, who follow him, who are fervent fans of his, and some of those people are crazy. And that language is just, it's incendiary. And I worry that it's going to lead to really bad consequences.
Howie?
Martha, at a time when the country needs healing, it seems that both sides are just locked in an escalating, vicious cycle of harsher and harsher rhetoric. So, Washington Post front page headline yesterday, day after the synagogue massacre. Critics say Trump has fostered the toxic environment for the political violence he denounces, the critics being liberals in the story. You showed GQ reporter Julia Yaffe earlier. She tweeted, "A word to my fellow American Jews. This president makes this possible." Today on CNN, Yaffe said, Donald Trump has radicalized more people than ISIS. But at the same time, I fault the president, who, by the way, was very eloquent the night after the Pittsburgh shootings and talking about the poison of anti-Semitism and the history of persecution of Jews. And then when he goes back to the true enemy of the people for fake news, which is most of the media as he defines it, it's essentially calling journalists traitors. It's wrong. Journalists love this country, whatever mistakes they may make. And it undermines the president's own call over the weekend to lower the voices and the temperature.
That out to Mercedes Schlapp, who we spoke to, just a moment ago. But you can watch the president. We've all watched him long enough to know that his initial instinct was to sort of be with the moment, to express obvious sorrow, and then he flips on the TV. He starts hearing people saying it's his fault, blaming him for inciting an insane, deranged individual to walk into a synagogue and kill people. My guess is that this person was insane and deranged before President Trump was in office, Jonathan. And I think, we have to be very, very careful. I think in some ways, President Trump's rhetoric is obviously very out there and it's very obvious, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there hasn't been, presidents in the past who have also had very strong feelings about things. Do you think that Jonathan, back to you, and I understanding that, you obviously are a reporter who covers the White House, but as a reporter who covers President Trump, what do you make of that? Watching how he reacts to things, is it politically advantageous for him? Does it work for him in any way? Is he appealing to someone on purpose?
It's two things at once. It's his natural instincts, and yeah, absolutely. Of course it appeals to a certain section of the public. The president's people, his people as he calls them, my people, they love this. They love hearing this. They're already angry at the press, and it makes them angrier, and they cheer him on. And you see it at the rallies. I mean, I covered President Trump during the campaign. All he would need to say by the end, it was like a call and response. He would just say Hillary Clinton, and the crowd would start chanting, "Lock her up." There's another half of the country there that he's not talking to when he says this. So it's hard to kind of give credence to the first statement, too much credence to the first statement, when you know that the real unfiltered Donald Trump is the enemy of the people. comment. He is pugnacious. He wants to fight, and he sees the press as a useful foil. He uses the media. He's probably, I think, in the last 20 years or 30 years, I've never seen a politician manipulate the media the way President Trump has.
Let me just read this from Bret and I want to get your reaction, Howie, and then we have to go.
Sure.
Bret tweeted this today. One of Trump's main failings is that he thinks everything is about him. One of his critics' main failings is that they do too. Their reaction to the hideous events of last week makes this clearer than ever. Howie.
That really nails it, because, look, while it's fine for the press to try to hold President Trump accountable for sometimes divisive, sometimes incendiary rhetoric, this whole idea of guilt by association, blood on the hands, I didn't like those kind of comments under President Obama. I don't like them aimed at President Trump, being tied to the actions of lunatics who are filled with hate. At the same time, when this liberal group of Jewish leaders in Pittsburgh says, don't come, we don't want you here, and you incited this attack, I mean, that is a libel. It seems like, who cares at this point who started it? Is anybody, president, press, political parties, going to stop it, as opposed to pointing fingers about who started it, kind of rise above and help us lower the tone just a little bit?
No, there was a time in this country when an event like this would have just brought everyone together in sympathy for the horrific act that was beset upon this synagogue while these people are praying. And now it instantly goes, everybody goes to their corner. And, you know, I guess for that part of it, certainly not for the crime itself, there is blame to go around. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Go ahead, Jonathan, quick call.
I was just going to say, yeah, we could do the two sides thing, and I agree with you, but he is the most powerful man on earth. His voice is not equal. He does have the capacity to speak to a nation in a way that no one else does.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Howard Kurtz.
Good to
We're going to
see
have
you.
more coming up on that thought as we move forward this morning. This evening, is unity possible in America? Trey Gowdy taking apart a few witnesses in his time on the Hill.
I don't give a damn what you appreciate Agent Strzok. I don't appreciate having an FBI agent with an unprecedented level of animus working on two major investigations during 2016.
However, Chairman Gowdy believes that it can be done. Unity is possible, and he joins me next. Politics, surely more potent than ever, continue to divide Americans right down the middle as the gap grows deeper by the day. And we look at the images of these individuals who lost their lives, and in the wake of it, there is so much discussion about the division in this country. Joining me now, the co-author of Unified, How Unlikely Friendship Gives Us Hope for a Divided Country, Congressman Trey Gowdy, and that was co-written by Senator Scott. Good to have you back on the show tonight, Congressman. Thank you very much for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, I want to start with what we left off with Jonathan Swan, who covers the White House, and talking about the sort of battle that goes on and the fingers that are pointed over what happened at the synagogue this weekend. But he felt that the responsibility lies more on the president than it does on the press, because he is, quote, the most powerful person in the world. Do you agree with that?
Well, I certainly agree he's the most powerful person in the world. He has a unique opportunity. I have never been good, Martha, at changing other people's behavior. I need to be good at engaging in self-reflection. And if every one of my fellow citizens would look in the mirror and say, what can I do to improve our country? How can I be less divisive? How can I be more intentional in my efforts to unify this country? I can't change President Trump's behavior. I can't change the headlines at Politico and the Washington Post. What I would love to see the president do when he goes to Pittsburgh is to eulogize the lives of those lost. That's what's unifying. Just like in Charleston, when 9 of my fellow South Carolinians lost their lives simply because they are black. Get to know the people who lost their lives. That would be unifying for my fellow citizens. But politicizing tragedies hours after they happened is just reflective of how incredibly divisive we are.
Here's a picture that you tweeted with sort of like your dream of how you wish things could be. Explain what you meant here.
Well, Bill Nettles in that picture was the U.S. attorney under President Obama. He's to the left of Chairman Mao politically. We've been friends for 10 years, and we'll be friends until we die. Tulsi Gabbard is one of the kindest, nicest, most decent people I have ever met. She happens to be a progressive from Hawaii. You wouldn't put a progressive Hindu from Hawaii with a three-part Calvinist Republican from South Carolina. But we have been intentional in our desire to have a friendship. And I think part of what plagues our country now is we have a tendency to surround ourselves with people who just ratify what we already believe. I mean, if you want to understand how President Obama was elected twice, you got to ask somebody who voted for him. And the same with Donald Trump. The media cannot fathom how he is president of the United States. Ask someone who voted for him. They will tell you why he is the president of the United States. But if all you do is surround yourself with the philosophy department at Princeton, then no, there are no Trump supporters there. So go ask some people in real America who felt an angst and uncertainty that led to his election. But if all we do is talk to people that just ratify what we already believe, we're headed in a bad direction.
80% of the country believes that we are divided. And the other thing that I think gets lost in this conversation is, you talk about what happened in South Carolina. There's a problem with, individuals who live in isolation, who are not part of a community, who perhaps aren't part of their own faith, who commit these kinds of acts over and over. They obviously are very deeply unstable, very deeply disturbed. And instead of talking about what's going wrong with the fabric of our community, perhaps that this kind of person, gets left out in the cold and allowed to do something like this, we end up, deep diving into, the things that he said on social media and all of this.
Well, speaking of things that ought to unify us, Martha, there ought to be common standards of decency. There ought to be a common acknowledgement that we need a moral code by which we live, that racism is wrong, that intolerance is wrong, that what Dylan Roof believed before he got in the car and drove to Carlson, not just what he did, but what he believed before he got in the car, is reprehensible and insidious. And the same with the shooter in Pittsburgh. But when we lose that sense of unity, that there is a moral code that is not relativistic, it exists every day, then it leads to this kind of malaise that unfortunately we find ourselves in. And tragedy used to be unifying, but now, Martha, it lasts for about 30 minutes. Yeah. I want to focus on the victims. If President Trump will focus on the victims and their lives, I think that's what my fellow Americans would love. Not focus on the shooter and not focus on the politics of it. Focus on the lives that were lost and how that impacts dozens and hundreds of people that were involved in their lives. I think that would be unifying.
Chairman Trey Gowdy, always good to see you, sir. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Yes, ma'am. You too. Yes, ma'am.
So coming up after this, this is not the first time that the president ran a midterm campaign that had a pretty good economy and jobs picture, while some of his opponents were in the middle of investigations and perhaps impeachment proceedings. So what President Trump and America perhaps could learn from what happened in 1998 with President Clinton, coming up next.
Let me say I'm very proud of what our party did yesterday in the face of the tide of history and an enormous financial disadvantage.
So we've got 7 days now until the big election, the most important midterms ever, according to the president. But if you dig deep into our history, you would see a similar race with the roles completely reversed. On October 29th, 1998, exactly 20 years ago today, Bill Clinton was president, Republicans were running on impeachment, and Democrats were running on this.
Republicans have made removing the president from office their top priority. They want to waste millions of our tax dollars on endless investigations. Democrats believe this election is about solving our real problems, protecting Social Security, patients' rights, smaller class sizes, more teachers. Haven't our families and our children had enough partisan investigating? Republicans, so intent on attacking the president they've forgotten about us. Next Tuesday, vote Democratic and tell Congress we're ready to move on.
Yeah, that's fascinating, right? If you're wondering how that message worked out.
Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Hume. This town is certainly buzzing, and the happy sounds are almost all coming from relieved and delighted Democrats. As for the Republicans, who thought a scandal-plagued president in his 6th year in office would certainly mean gains for them, it is a time of agonizing reappraisal.
He's a classic. Mike Emanuel here with the story from 1998 midterms and how they could foreshadow what's to come. Good evening, Mike.
Martha, good evening. There are certainly some interesting similarities between now and 20 years ago. Both Presidents Donald Trump and Bill Clinton had strong economies going in their favor. Each have criticized what they consider to be unfair media coverage. Both the 42nd and 45th presidents had to deal with special legal probes. In Clinton's era, it was independent counsel Kenneth Starr. Now, of course, President Trump is dealing with special counsel Robert Mueller conducting an investigation. Today, the White House press secretary was asked if this election is a referendum on President Trump.
Look, I can't get into specifics that will impact the election, but I can tell you that the president wants to see more people that support his policies elected than not.
Back in 1998, Newt Gingrich said the buck stopped with him.
Look, I'm the speaker, so I'll take responsibility. We should probably have aggressively pushed cutting taxes and saving Social Security much harder than we did this year.
This time, Republican leaders are campaigning against Nancy Pelosi becoming Speaker again and warning that Democrats like Adam Schiff and Maxine Waters could be committee chairs if Democrats are in charge. The lawmaker charged with winning Democrats back the majority in the House made this bold prediction on Fox News Sunday.
I'm confident that Democrats will win back the House this year. We built our strategy around our candidates, incredible men and women with records of service, many who have served our country in the U.S. military, former CIA officers, FBI agents who have committed their lives to keeping our country safe.
A key theme for GOP leaders is a Republican Congress will continue working on solutions that protect and prolong our prosperity. Soon we'll see if this is similar to 1998 or an election all its own. Martha?
Soon we will see. Mike, thank you very much. Joining me now, former Democratic Senator Evan Baier, who flipped Indiana from Republican to Democrat in that 1998 election. Sir, good to see you. Thank you very much for being here tonight. So what goes through your mind when you look back at those 20 years ago images and the ad and everything, and you think about what's happening in this election?
Well, Martha, thank you for having me. It's amazing how much things can change in 20 years. Although the way things change, sometimes they remain the same. In that particular election, you know, my home state is a deep red state. President Trump carried Indiana by 19 points. But back in that particular election, I happened to win by 24. I don't think that's possible today. I don't think I or anyone else could do that today because the country is so deeply polarized. And yet the thing that remains the same, and I think your reporter Mike put his finger right on it, and the ad that you showed put its finger right on it, people want the election to be about them and their concerns, middle-class economic concerns. And politicians who focus on that and put some of the political buzz to the side, they're the ones who tend to do the best.
Let's take a look at a Gallup poll, which shows back in 1998, the Democratic Party, you know, the question was, which political party do you think can do a better job of handling the problem that you think is most important, the Republican Party or the Democratic Party? And when you compare them, you can see from, 20 years ago and from today, they're basically pretty much evenly divided, 41 to 40 and 42 to 40. When you sort of put all that in the mix and you look at what's going on out there, do you think that Democrats are focusing on the right thing if they want to retake the House?
Well, I think the Kavanaugh hearings were a tactical error, the way that they were portrayed to the public. That really energized the Republican base. And again, I think many middle-class Americans, undecided voters, independents were saying, well, what does all this have to do with me and my daily concerns? I think the rhetoric out there on the far left about impeaching the president and all that, that's just a replay of what the mistake Newt Gingrich made 20 years ago. So that hurts the Democrats. So I think in this particular election, though, again, unfortunately, the country, as Congressman Gowdy was pointing out, is so deeply divided. That's going to help the Democrats in the House because many of those districts were carried by Hillary Clinton. But in my old body, the United States Senate, most of those races are in deep red states. That's going to help the Republicans. We almost, Martha, have a parliamentary system today where your viewers and the American people think there's a party on the left, a party on the right. They're not really judging the candidates on their individual merits, and instead they think, oh, they just go out there to Washington and they're going to vote the party line. I kind of hope we get back to the day where individual character, individual ideas, and independence matter. But right now, it doesn't seem to matter that much.
Fascinating. Well, very good to have you with us, sir. Thank you. Former Senator Evan Baier from Indiana. Great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you.
So you may have noticed that the stock market took a pretty big hit last week, and now the Wall Street Journal says it's all downhill from here. Details on the politics behind all this, what's at stake, and are they right when we come back? So, market took a bit of a hit today, down about 250 points for the Dow, wiping out gains from earlier in the day, as many on Wall Street fear that maybe the worst is yet to come. Even the Wall Street Journal declaring, quote, U.S. economy flashes signs it's downhill from here. Love those headlines, right? Here now, one of the authors of that article, John Hilsenrath, global economics editor and Fox News contributor, and Susan Lee from the Fox Business Network. John, let me start with you.
Sure.
Is it really that gloomy?
Well, let me say, our article today wasn't saying that there's going to be a recession. No one that we're talking to is predicting a recession. But what we are saying is that the growth rate of the economy looks like it's going to slow down. We had great growth in the last 6 months, 4.2% in the second quarter, 3.5% in the third quarter. But a lot of the economists that we talked to are predicting a slowdown to under 3% in the months ahead.
And what's the biggest reason why?
Well, one of the things that's concerning is that we've seen business investment slow down. And if we're going to get these faster growth rates of 3% that President Trump has talked about, we need business investment to boost worker productivity. And we started to have that early in the year, and the last couple of reports on gross domestic product showed that business investment has slowed. That might have something to do with the tariff wars that we've been involved in.
All right, I want to play this quick soundbite from Jerome Powell, because the president thinks it's partly his problem. Watch this.
The really extraordinarily accommodative low interest rates that we needed when the economy was quite weak, we don't need those anymore. We need interest rates to be gradually, very gradually moving back toward normal.
So why is he signaling that he's going to keep going, Susan? That's not really typical.
Yeah, it's not typical. And in fact, he really spooked the markets in this market sell-off when he said he's going to take interest rates past neutral. That means it might even be higher than we anticipated. And every earnings call from every company that I've been on so far in this earnings season has pointed that out as a big, big headwind heading into next year and this year as well.
All right, so real quick from the president, here's what he thought about that.
My biggest threat is the Fed, because the Fed is raising rates too fast, and it's independent, so I don't speak to him, but I'm not happy with what he's doing. Give me zero interest rates right now, and you take a look at our numbers. It'd be the greatest economy in the history of the world.
So I just have time for like one thought from each of you real quick. Susan, what did you think about that?
It has been shown historically that the Federal Reserve has ended big bull market runs, so that's what the market is really concerned about right now.
Yeah, so Goldilocks is what we like, John.
I would say we had zero interest rates because we had inflation near zero for many years. Inflation is now near 2%, which is the Fed's target. So that's why it's raising interest rates, because inflation has picked up.
Thanks, guys. Great to see you both. Good to have you here tonight. So Democrats haven't been shy about telling Hillary Clinton that they feel, a lot of them at least, they would like her to go away and make room for new people. What says she?
Well, I'd like to be president. Okay.
Oh, very interesting, right? Brad Parscale, manager of President Trump's 2020 re-election campaign, joins me exclusively for the rest of the show with his thoughts on the possible opponent and all the rest next. So despite repeated calls by many Democrats to just take a step back, Hillary Clinton actually took another step forward, fueling speculation that she may actually run again.
We're going to talk about 2020 in a minute. Do you want to run again?
No.
Wait.
No.
That was a pause.
Well, I'd like to be president.
Okay.
I'm not going to even think about it until we get through this November 6th election about what's going to happen after that.
That sounds like she wants to run. Joining me exclusively, the man who would be on the other side of the campaign fight if Hillary decides to run again, Brad Parscale is the manager of President Trump's 2020 campaign. Brad, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me back.
So is that who the president would like to run against?
It's almost, I'm caught off guard that she's talking about running again. If she ends up being the candidate, I'm happy to have the Trump 2.0 version against Hillary, I guess. It's shocking, though. I would think it's time for the Clintons to go off the pasture.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to me because she clearly wants to leave the door open there. And I would imagine that there are a lot of there's so many Democrats who want to run. I mean, I'm picturing that it's probably going to be like when President Trump ran the first time with like 17 people up there, right?
I think it's be brutal. You know, I think they can't all just run saying they don't like the president. You know, they're all going to have to choose and they're going to tear each other apart. And I think it's going to be an interesting primary for the Democrats. We'll see who comes out the other end. You know, we're going to be open to multiple people. You know, I mean, we're going to watch and start to get our op-ed research and do everything we can to, you know, be ready.
Yeah, I want to ask you quickly about what you thought about some people blaming the president for what happened in Pittsburgh and also for the would-be pipe bomber.
Yeah, look, I just think that's just clearly wrong. I mean, look, the president, and the campaign, and this is a fight, and we have been in a fight, but it's a fight with our heart and our minds, and not with our fists. And clearly, we don't condone violence. I don't want anyone to get hurt, but the fake news media, and let's be clear, it's the fake news media, not the media, has been an attack and have done everything they can to try to destroy this president, destroy this movement, and try to wipe off tens of millions of Americans and what they think and what they believe in for the future. And I've been a victim of that, and multiple people in the administration have been a victim of that, and we're going to continue to fight. But it's a fight with our hearts and our minds. Unfortunately, evil exists. We don't want to awaken it. And I just don't think the blame sits on those evildoers. But we have to continue to fight for tens of millions of people where I came from, in the hometown in Kansas where I came from, the people that have been forgotten.
Let's take a look at how you're doing that. This is your new ad, and I want to get a thought on what you're thinking with this. Watch this.
Things are starting to change. There's more opportunity and security to invest in the ones that matter.
Look, we can't get distracted from the biggest issue, which are jobs and our kids' future.
But this could all go away if we don't remember what we came from and choose the right future.
So this is for the midterms. No President Trump in there.
Yeah, well, look, there's multiple audiences you have to win for election. Look, this president is doing everything he can to hold the House for the midterms, do everything he can to flip seats in the Senate. And there's multiple audiences. We have lots of ads running that are 100% Trump, right to Trump voters, low propensity turnout Trump voters. But we also have an audience of independent voters, mothers in this country who really need to make that choice, what's best for their children's future, for a strong
Those
economy.
are the areas that you're, potentially in trouble in 2020 as well.
Yes.
Philadelphia, you've got Los Angeles, Minnesota, all those suburban moms who may have voted for the president last time, but maybe don't like some of the comments this time.
Yeah, a lot of moms see that, and 40% or so say the economy is a big choice for them. They need to pay bills. They live paycheck to paycheck sometimes. And this president's making it easier for them. Wages are increasing. It's not just about unemployment going down. Wages are increasing. Real life is getting easier and better. And we need to remind them we could go right back to what things were when things were tough.
All right. So when we come back, I want to ask you about what the president's first campaign move is going to be after the midterms. Quick break and more with Brad when we come back.
When you look at that, thousands of people, somebody said, now on that one, they build it down. I'm pretty good at figuring out how many people. Thousands and thousands of people on the bridge. When you looked at that bridge loaded up with people, that's called an invasion of our country.
Back now with Brad Parscale, with the president's 2020 campaign manager. That was from Laura Ingraham's interview. The rest of it plays tonight. Invasion.
Yeah.
That's the word he's using.
Well,
some people will not take that well.
Yeah, well, this president in 2016 made a promise to protect our borders, to make us a sovereign nation. And without a nation of laws, we're not a nation. And we need to protect ourselves from illegal aliens, and we need to make sure that we have immigration laws that are complied by. Otherwise, we're not a country. And I think that president made the promise, and he's going to keep it.
All right. I want to talk to you. Do you think that the Republicans can keep the House and the Senate?
Yeah. Look, I think we're in a tough road.
Yeah?
I think this president, I think we could flip seats in the Senate, which is only 17 times since 1934 has that ever happened. Only 8 seats since 1934 itself. And he could possibly do 4 of those, 50% of that since the Great Depression in one election. That just shows right now how president is. The House is tough. I think cards were stacked against him. I mean, you had retirements, you had fundraising problems, you had all kinds of issues. And I think the president has rewritten the map to make it easier. And I think he's out fighting. And the fact that I'm even sitting here tonight saying we have a chance to hold the House and win seats in the Senate shows clearly this president is doing more than any president has in history to do it. Yeah. And his approval rating in the Republican Party is 88%, the highest I've ever had.
Put the map up. You can see where the president's going because, we all remember that you were the person who was saying we need to go to Western Pennsylvania, we need to go to Michigan, we need to go to Ohio. So people look at this map and they say those are all Senate seats. That tells us that they have given up on the House.
Oh, there's a couple House seats in there, and there's also a governorship in there. But look, the president also needs to make the biggest impact he can. It's a different race. It is where he can go. And sometimes spinning on one House seat in a place that it's hard to get to might be more difficult. It's also about the president traveling as the president versus a campaign is night and day. It's like moving an armada versus moving a rowboat around.
I mean, that's a pretty active schedule anyway,
but like the Secret
even given
Service,
that.
What we've done, even with the Secret Service now, I have to give the Secret Service high, marks for being able to get this done. It's difficult to move a president, and I think former presidents will tell you it's not easy to make that many stops, and this president's doing it.
All right, so there were 3 campaign managers last time around. How many are there going to be this time around?
Well, officially there was 2. There was a campaign chairman, and Kellyanne's still around, and I'm friends with Corey, so we're all surviving just fine. I'm hoping I'll be the only one. I hope the president trusts in me and helps me get it done, and I'll have the great support of Jared Kushner and the family, like Eric Trump, and I'll have the president, and this family is the most amazing family this country's ever seen, and I think they're going to continue to do things that are going to be great for it.
All right, last question. Roseanne on stage with Trump. Good idea? You still think that's a good idea?
No, it's not about. Look, I think that when you are in the room, you throw out ideas. I still think that once it came out that she didn't even know what was happening, I thought maybe this is an idea. It was kind of in a joking manner, but unfortunately everything leaks out, and she was never on stage.
And she will not be, I assume.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, no. There has been no requests for that.
All right. Unfortunately, we've got to leave it there. But I hope you'll come back. It's been very interesting to talk to you. There's obviously a lot going on. You're going to be the man at the center of all of this very soon. So
thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, we will be watching very closely. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you
Brad
very much.
Parscale. That's our story on this Monday night. We'll see you back here tomorrow night at 7. Tucker Carlson's coming up next.